Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Special Committee of the Whole meeting. This is a joint meeting with the Firehall Steering Committee. This is Thursday, June 5th, 2025. I'm so pleased to see you here. First of all, we would like to acknowledge that the District of Metchosin conducts its business on the Coast Salish territory and the territory of the Shiano First Nations people. The District of Metchosin works to increasingly be mindful of our commitment to be more inclusive in our governance with our neighbors. I would like to acknowledge our neighboring First Nations governments with whom are committed to building stronger relationships. We understand that they're also making important decisions for their nation and for our community. We want to acknowledge the Shiano First Nation and the Sook First Nation, and also want to welcome Chief Chips and Councillor Pateman to our meeting. Council, before you have an agenda. If I could take a motion to approve the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Introductions. So, as I said, welcome to the joint Council Firehall Steering Committee meeting. I want to welcome members of the Firehall Steering Committee to this table, namely Mike Hornick, the chair of the Firehall Steering Committee, Brent Donaldson, Scott Henning, DC Henning, Bruce McCall, Jardy Carline sitting at the back, Steve Malco, and Shane Sear. Welcome. And also at the table, we have Councillor Sherry Epp, Councillor Jay Shukin, Councillor Steve Gray, and Councillor Shelley Donaldson. I also want to welcome our consultants, Edward Craig and Kimberly Johnson, who are architects and consultants from Johnston, Davidson Architecture and Planning, Inc., to this meeting. They're live streamed here. Welcome, Ed. Nice to see you. So in the spring...
It's just Ed. No complaint.
In the spring of 2022, Skyline Engineering was asked by the in the spring of 2022, Skyline Engineering was asked to review the Firehall structure and the historical documents to provide a structural review and comment on the existing seismic capacity. The Firehall Steering Committee was set up earlier that year. The current council approved the spending of funds for the Firehall feasibility study in March of 2023. An RFP for the contract was issued later that year. The Firehall Steering Committee has been tasked with working through the information from the consultants. All Firehall Steering Committee meetings have been held in open meetings in the public with agendas and minutes. Council has only discussed the Firehall feasibility study at open meetings. As promised, we will continue to be open and transparent as we work our way through this assessment and this process. The objective of this meeting is to have an exchange of information between these two groups. Much of this information is technical in nature and complex. We have experts in the field, both at this table and online, within the steering committee as well, who will help clarify this information for us. This is a fact-finding meeting. I'm hoping that there will be a healthy exchange of information between all parties at this table. No decisions or resolutions will be had at this meeting. All the information from this evening will be forwarded to our following meeting starting next Monday. We have plenty of time for this meeting, for this discussion, and I want everybody at this table to feel welcome. Your opinion is valued. As far as the meeting guidelines are concerned, we will continue to adhere to normal council procedures, so please direct all your comments and questions through the chair. The District of Metchosin is considering several options for modernizing the existing aging fire hall to meet the new standards. Let's begin with public participation, and then we will move into the first report. So should the public wish to speak, you have 4 minutes. If you could state your name and your street. Thank you.
It's in need of replacement and has been for many years. The meaningful study and discussion of its future is long overdue, but we are very grateful that these conversations are now happening. Selby and I believe that a new fire hall, possibly constructed on the adjacent municipal property, would be the most expedient and cost-effective solution for a couple of reasons. First, the renovation and reconstruction of the old fire hall, while housing the fire department in some sort of temporary structure, is fraught with unknowns, costly in terms of budget and time delays. Repurposing the old structure to accommodate the future needs and demands of a busy rural emergency unit seems to us to be unreasonable, wishful thinking. Second, if the level clear land next to the present facility can be made available through the ALC, then planning, fundraising, tendering, and construction can begin without interruption to the existing community fire service. To our minds, this is a very big positive. And thirdly, the transition from the old hall to a new one would pose the least disruption to all of the other functions that operate out of the fire hall, in addition to emergency fire and medical response. Metchosin's community safety and emergency preparedness agencies are vital for any unexpected events. Our beloved firefighters and dedicated volunteers give their all to protect us and keep us safe. The least we can do in return is to provide them with a safe and healthy work environment. And just so you know, I went to buy a lottery ticket the other day, and the woman at the till said to me, "What are you going to do if you win?" I said, "Build Metchosin a new fire hall."
Okay. Thank you for that.
Karen Hoffman. This is the first time I've used this mic, obviously. Karen Hoffman, Neeld Road. I would like to thank council for getting going on this project, and I would like to thank the steering committee for all the work that you've put in. Volunteer time is greatly appreciated in Metchosin. I am definitely in favor of building a new fire hall. I would think the most logical solution would be to build it on ALR land. And having said ALR land, I think that all of this property should be withdrawn from the ALR land, particularly as 70% of it already has exemptions from ALR use, and it doesn't seem logically feasible for it ever to become agriculturally significant in Metchosin. It's a community asset as it is. I would like to, it doesn't make sense to refurbish the fire hall that exists now, given that the earthquake capacity and the building code, a lack thereof, is of concern. I think that's about, yeah, all. We need to provide our volunteers with the best possible equipment and support our fire chief in recruiting volunteers so that we don't become one of the communities in BC that has no volunteer fire department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gavin Aubrey, Metchosin Road. I've had the pleasure of being a volunteer firefighter in Metchosin for 7-ish years now, since 2018. I've had the utmost privilege of working alongside the most dedicated and caring individuals I've ever met. The members of Metchosin Fire are willing to drop their lives, miss holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, and family time at a moment's notice to respond to any request for help. We're willing to put our lives on the line for the opportunity to save another. We acknowledge that every time we get on the truck, it might be the last ride. We know that the scenes that we see will be burned into our memories, and that every time we close our eyes, they'll live in our nightmares. We accept these risks because to save a life, to make a difference in someone's worst day, is the highest calling. However, it has become apparent that one of the biggest risks to our health and safety is the fire hall. Councillor Shukin asked, what do you call a apparatus bay and a station together? But in the fire service, we call it a firehouse, because that's what it is. It's a place where we come to gather, where we train, where we sleep, where we wait for the call to action, where we set up events, where we teach the community and we host birthdays. Right now, the firehouse that we have is not a beacon of safety, but a place that will make us sick. We have inadequate decontamination areas, which will increase our cancer risk. We're constantly exposed to diesel fumes. We have a rat infestation that leaves us shaking feces out of our gear. We have unacceptable mold levels. We have a roof that leaks so bad that we run out of buckets. The deluge of water has continued. We are members that have recently started sleeping at the hall to provide a better service, a 24/7 service. They'll be crushed by the rubble that Councillor Shukin pointed out will happen if that building collapses. We'll be delayed in emergency response to any mass disaster by not being able to get our trucks out or by having them crushed. What we want is to serve this community. We want to serve this community to the best of our capacity. We are there to serve with any call, from setting up events to catching bullfrogs, my favorite memory of the fire service. We want the ability to respond without delay to disasters, to not needlessly increase our cancer risk. We want the center of emergency response to not be the biggest danger to the emergency response. While a massive earthquake could happen 350 years from now, if a mass disaster happens today, we would not be able to adequately respond. The current firehouse is not a theoretical danger, but a current danger to those inside of it and those who respond from it. I know financial responsibility is important and due process must be followed. However, I hope the urgency of the situation is understood and the preciousness of life is at the forefront of everyone's mind. The final cost of this firehouse will not be measured in dollars per square foot, but in preventable loss of life for indecision and delay. So I leave one question for Mayor and Council. What is the worth of a life to you?
We don't clap at council meeting. Thank you for not clapping. Chief Chips.
I didn't clap, but I will commend that young man. What is a life worth? I mean, what a statement to make. I'm here to support the firefight in the hall being moved, whether it be in ALR Lions or anywhere. I believe that when the firemen come up to look after us, we don't grab the hose from them and start hosing off the house. You know, they know their job, they know what their needs are, and they should participate in where their new facility should go and how it should work and what should be in it. I think it's the most important people that should have the word or the say is the firemen. Like, and I stand behind it fully because I know that when they get on the truck, it might be the last ride. I know it might be they might be the last person I see. Like, they're there for us. They're always going to be for us. And when you're running a municipality, the things that you need most for safety is sewer, water, emergency services. You can't not put those aside. Your town won't work without those. And we have to make sure that our emergency services are correct, healthy. Rats, feces in your ear. I don't even know why we're having a meeting about this. Like that's odd to hear, and odd to find out that we're, I don't know, debating or not debating. I don't even know what this is yet. Like, I'm just here to support, but I wouldn't think there would be a debate on that at all. They need a safe environment because they keep us safe, and they're always going to keep us safe. They said themselves, the last thing they might do is get on that fire truck. And I don't know how to repay those people. This is not my story, but one of our members seemed like she was holding on. This was her last, she was leaving the world. And we were debating on what's making her hold on, like we didn't wish her anything bad on her, but I was talking to my friend and she goes, the firemen. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she goes, the firemen, she wants to see the firemen. We looked over in the bed and she just smiled. One call. And they were there. And I don't know, she left shortly after. Like, I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but she smiled when they got there. And I don't know how you can replace that or put a value to that, or why you would even debate on stuff like that. Like, the fire hall needs to be fixed. let's do what it takes to get it fixed. If we need to partner somewhere, tell us where we need to partner and we'll show up. We're ready to stand by these firemen, these people, these young men, young women, and do what it takes. They need lifting up right now and we should be doing that. So thank you and Ryzuk for having me here.
Glad you spoke first. I couldn't beat my grandson. He was the guy. Ron Aubrey, 3745 Metchosin Road. I have every community covered. My grandson's here in Metchosin. My son's the fire chief in Langford. And I'm a past volunteer with Colwood for 20 years and now a life member. I care. I can't believe I'm here talking to save and get a new fire hall. These people are our first line of defense. It doesn't really matter which way we go, whether it's a fire, it's an accident, a bee sting, where I had somebody die on my property. Fire department was there. So there's been hearing, council, that you've been hearing negativity from people, so you're concerned about what the hell am I going to do? Well, you're hearing the positive tonight. And by God, we need a new fire hall. I am concerned, council, that you are allowing these firefighters to be in this building now. When there is mold, there's feces, and whatever, and these people are sleeping every night to be there to protect us. That's bullshit. As far as I'm concerned, Chief, call work safe, because if you don't, guess what? They might get a call. Council, you are their employer. It's your responsibility. So if you can't give them a clean building, then bring in a portable. But these firefighters need to know that they come to be defended in a safe environment. Public support, where I'm a little concerned about here is that you have an opportunity for $7 million, a grant possibility, but you've got to get it done by September. That's a lot of money for us taxpayers. So let's move forward to get the grant put in to see if we can get that $7 million. Every year we've been delaying this build. We hired people within our community to be give us their recommendations for a hall. Don't delay anymore. You know what every year brings? It's more dollars and it gets costly, and we can't afford it. Because sooner or later, that's exactly what's going to happen. We can't afford it because there's only a small number of people in our community of just over 5,000. So we got the police to have take a big chunk of our money. But please, council, you were elected by us, the residents, to work on the best interest of us, the residents. And I'm saying to you, the best interest for us residents is a new fire hall. And quit dilly-dallying. Get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sasha Kubicek, 565 Wooten Road. I'm a 13-year farmer in the community, a huge advocate for ALR land and farm protection. And I just want to applaud the steering committee and contractors for being so conscientious and forward-thinking on the location of this fire hall. This is one of the most cut and dry exclusions out of the ALR that I've ever seen in my career. This is keeping key infrastructure and assets within the village core. That land there has no agriculture value. I'm a mentor with the Young Agrarians for over a decade. We help new farmers start farms. We help existing farmers expand their productions. I would tell a new farmer or any farmer not to touch that with a 10-foot pole. The feral rabbit situation in that field alone Add on to that, extreme flooding in the winter. That has no drainage. There's no irrigation. There's no infrastructure for storing tools, for any kind of assets for a farm. On top of that, it's a weekly parking lot for decades of soil compaction. This is a no-brainer. I applaud the location and really encourage this council to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Panton, Sandgate Road, which is down at Weirs Beach. I just wanted to thank Mayor and Council and the committee for giving us the chance to speak. My husband and I feel really strongly and have consulted with the fire crew for years. We are stewards down at Weirs Beach, and the increase in traffic and people down there, we've called for rescues, we've called for accidents, we've called for fires. And if we had to wait for another department to come, I don't want to think what would happen. But there's 4 things that I want you to consider, and what has been said by Chief Chips and this very eloquent I won't repeat, but obviously our current firehouse is unsafe. The emergency response is being compromised, and I didn't realize until I read the report, and also in the Goldstream Gazette today they outlined some more issues around the 70-year-old firehouse, which I thought it wasn't that old, but apparently is it 50 years? It said 70. But our Metchosin firefighters deal with fires, medical calls, and wildfires, and our crews are already facing increasing demands. From personal experience, we've been able to count on the chief and her crew, and we've all noticed an increase in traffic on our roads, beaches, and trails. It's only going to increase with the growth of beachlands and Royal Bay. You know, it's a long-term and smart investment. This isn't just about fixing today's problems. It's about preparing for the next 25 to 50 years. A new hall will be energy efficient, climate resilient, and ready for future growth. Insurance companies assess risk when setting premiums. If a community lacks a modern functional fire hall, it may be rated as higher due to slower emergency response times or poor fire suppression infrastructure. Insurers may charge higher premiums, which will affect all of us as taxpayers. Addressing the concern, but what about taxes? Listen, it's understandable. We all feel the pressure of rising costs, but let's be clear. Public safety infrastructure is a core responsibility of local government. Public safety should not be deferred for budget optics. The cost of inaction is higher, delaying response, increasing repair costs, and even liability if the hall fails in a crisis. The no tax increases sounds good politically, but it's not a sound reason to deny essential infrastructure that protects lives. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and we are in a strong position to act. Most importantly, this is a core responsibility of local government and our elected officials. Thank you for letting me share my opinion. However, all that actually needs to be said, as Chief Chip said, is why are we even having this discussion? You need to apply for the grant to offset the cost for this firehouse, and it should be the only thing that the elected officials and committees should be considering at this point. Your personal opinions as elected officials should be superseded by the needs of those who voted for you. We should not be putting up roadblocks. We should be future focused in applying for the grant and building a new house. We have the facts, the funding pathway, and the opportunity. Let's do the right thing together for Metchosin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sue Strugnell, 1007B Glen Forest Way. I was a volunteer firefighter with Metchosin as well as Langford. I have attended funerals of firefighters that have passed away to cancer, cancers that we did not know about previously. When we are looking at a new fire hall, we need to be forward thinking because there's always health discoveries that are being discovered, new cancers. Who knew the turnout gear was actually killing the firefighters? So we do need to plan for the present and the future. If that big one happened overnight, would the first people we'd be rescuing is our rescue crew whose corpses are in the collapsed building? Would you want to be responsible for that? Our current model of staffing as a pay per call is cost savings. What would be the amount of taxpayer money if we actually had to go to a full-time career fire crew. So if you want to offset some of your funding, keep with our current pay-per-call method rather than paying even a couple of full-time career firefighters. That's what all I've got to say, but just some food for thought. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jacob Lamb, Metchosin Road. I am the Officer of Operations at the Firehall. I am training officer this year, and I'm president of this society. There's one other person who cares for these guys more than me. That's Chief. There's one other person who's in that hall more than me, and that's Chief. I appreciate the fiscal pressure. I appreciate this hot potato that is in your guys' hand, and the music is running out. The fire hall is infrastructure. The discussion needs to be how we're going to pay for it, not whether or not we build a new fire hall. The investment is in these people. The people, the community's children are at the fire hall. The strength of the community is measured by how we take care of our weakest and most vulnerable. And that is what we are doing. Give us a safe building. That's all we're asking. Give us a safe building. Give us something that's not going to kill us. Give us something we can be proud of. Give us something you guys can hang your hats on and say that you did.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ellen Frisch, Perry Crossroad. I'm a familiar face to some of you. I'm going to speak more, I'm in favor of a fire hall. My background is in regulatory planning, community development, and I think to echo Sasha's comment, this is the most cut and dry exclusion application the ALC will have ever seen. I refer to a very similar application received and approved by the ALC 59930 for exclusion of 6 hectares of lands in their recreation area to include a fire hall. There are 2 challenges here, though. I hear the immediacy of this, and even putting in portables next to the fire hall would require a non-farm use permit because of the situation we're in now. The ALC is years behind in their review of applications, and I know the last approval for the fire training towers took 16 months to approve a non-farm use for that, the erection of that, which just came last November. So if we're thinking about wanting to deal with the immediate environmental concerns we're having, I think there needs to be some outside the box thought on that. I think that's a side question to whether the build happens. I support the exclusion application, and I think the location is perfect for all the reasons that have been expressed tonight. Critical proximity to central locations and other services and training needs. I think that's about it. And I want to say it's a very emotional night. My daughter was almost, Sue was almost the last person my daughter saw. I still appreciate her wherever she is.
Thanks, Ellen.
Good evening, Kathy Atherton, 4995 LeBlanc Road. First, I want to thank the Firehall Steering Committee for all the hard work that they did, because I know there was countless hours put into that and a lot of thought. And I read through the whole package for tonight's meeting, and there seems to be a very clear-cut case for going ahead with a new fire hall, and at least exploring the options. And the ALR situation seems to be, as Ellen was saying, sort of tailor-made. It's already in the permitted uses to do the fire hall, so there's obviously options you can pick. that you were given as to how to go about doing that with the exclusions, etc. But it looks like a case can be made for proceeding with the whole thing. And I guess I just add as a last point, I've had two sons who were in the very forefront of the junior firefighter program, and they learned some wonderful skills, wonderful life skills, communication skills, and it was like just a great backgrounding for them. And I so appreciate and understand what a huge effort the volunteers put in, and a huge thank you to them for that. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Kerry Patton from Sandgate Road as well. I'm not, there's been excellent support here for building Firehall, and I'm not going to repeat many of the things that people said, but I do support the new Firehall, and I do believe it should be built next door to prevent any discontinuation of service. But a big thing that I also think we have to think about is that we need to build a facility that's going to attract volunteers in the future. By looking at a lot of these, our volunteer firefighters, thank you for what you do, that I don't know for sure, but based on their ages, many of them may be interested in full-time firefighting. And I know that our department, or the volunteer department, does a lot of training. And I know that there are opportunities for firefighters right now, but things change over the years. And there may not be as many opportunities for full-time firefighters in the coming years, potentially. And if we don't have a facility that can attract people to be there on the long term, even when there potentially aren't jobs in firefighting, that hall could be empty. So I just think we need to keep that in mind, that we build a facility for the future that attracts people to come and volunteer for us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else? Yeah.
Sherry Rourke, Rocky Point Road. I'm here as a resident and also as the chair of the Metchosin's Healthy Communities Advisory Select Committee. I had a lot to say, but I think everybody that's spoken before me has said a lot, so I'll be brief. I think what I most appreciated here tonight, in addition to support for the fire hall, was acknowledgement from longtime local farmers who pointed out that that piece of land identified for the new location is not viable for agriculture. I think we need to remember that these are passionate advocates for preserving farmland with experience in agricultural policy development, and their input should carry heavy weight in this conversation. Most importantly, I think advancing this process sends a clear and positive message that Metchosin respects and supports its emergency personnel and is committed to investing in their safety and well-being. These are people who respond to medical emergencies, fires, rescues, and more. We rely on them, and they should be able to rely on us. What's loud and clear is that we can't keep doing nothing. We can't leave our firefighters in a facility that fails basic health and safety standards. They protect us. It's time we act to protect them. And finally, I really think we need to shift the tone in this community. This should be something we celebrate, not fear. This is a building that will provide a safe, healthy, functional workplace for the people who serve and protect us. It's an investment in public safety, emergency preparedness, and long-term community resilience. We should be treating it as a positive step forward for Metchosin. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak at the microphone this evening? Okay, thank you for everybody that spoke. Let's move along in our agenda. On page 3, we're moving to reports. This is the Firehall Feasibility Study. Firehall Steering Committee Chair's Report Update. Thank you, Mike.
So the purpose of the steering committee, I think, as we all know, was to engage with consultants as we sorted through what the needs of the fire hall was. And so from there, we basically came up with the engineers' reports, hazardous materials reports, several engineers' reports, hazardous materials reports and the architectural consultant that sort of led us to the conclusion of the different feasibility study options and siting and space gap and so on. Yeah, so the outcome seems to be that the preferred option, which is option 1A, it basically lays out a new fire hall in the adjacent lot, which gives us a few different advantages there. If we build new next door, we've got cost control. We don't have to disrupt the fire service during construction, and we don't have to set up temporary facilities, which would be costly as well. And that we'd also wouldn't necessarily need to realize any demolition expenses. We could possibly repurpose the building or some of it, or something to that effect. So I think there's a lot of financial advantages over and above the no disruption of service.
And Mike, also you've speak into the mic. Okay. Mike, that you've noticed or you've listed a number of questions here. I'm just wondering if you can go through them. Hopefully at the end of the evening, we'll have more insight into the answers. We don't have to answer them directly right now, but if you could list the questions.
How's that? Better? Okay. So question 1 is, should the district proceed with a full replacement option 1A or explore retrofitting despite the cost limitations? So I think that's question number 1. And really that stems around the apparatus bay. So the apparatus bay is clearly the newest and best part of that building, although it falls severely short of what the current code requirements would be. So option 2 or question 2 is council willing to direct use of ALR land for this critical infrastructure? So that would require a application to the ALC to get a non-form use permit or remove it from the agricultural land reserve. Then I guess question 3 would be, do we repurpose the apparatus bay or decommission it if we were to build next door? And then that would lead to question 4, which if we can get those couple of directions, then we could continue with our feasibility study. The consultant could complete his Class D estimates and conceptual drawings.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move along to page 7, page 7, the Johnston, Davidson architecture. Ed, are you going to take this online?
I'm available to answer any questions. How can I help here?
Page 7, yeah. CAO Payette, can you help lead us?
Yeah, I can do that through the chair and through the committees and to the general public. Welcome. So maybe I'll just go through a little bit of dialogue and history and purpose for tonight. Tonight is an opportunity for the committees to have a discussion about the where we're at in the process. Where we're at in the process is that we've had our consultant finalize his report. His report is comprehensive, and I'll just quickly go through the table of contents to give everybody some context of the information that's provided to the committees tonight, and this information will be available to the public for sure. There has been weekly meetings. I'd like to thank Mike, the chair, for dedicating a whole bunch of his time to the process, meeting with the consultants, and formulating information for the steering committee that was concise and understandable so they could have good dialogue.
And so that has all occurred in the last 6 months. Steering committee meetings have been open to the public, and the public have had an opportunity to have engagement as well. The table of contents, I'll just go through the table of contents in summary, and it'll help the committee tonight to draw some questions or some conclusions. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of technical information. I wanted to thank the fire chief and her staff for providing the consultants with the bulk of the historical and technical information that they know of in the building. There's a summary of the document. That's a quick read. I recommend people read the summary. The existing building and the site description. We spent a month gathering historical data on the building and providing the historical information to the consultants, and all of the relevant information we had on the building as far as technical documents, so they would have a good baseline understanding of the current situation. The needs analysis was conducted over approximately a month to 2 months period, where the architect grilled the members of the working and steering committee and the fire chief and the deputy fire chief on specifically what the needs of our program is. Our program is unique, our program is amazing, and our fire department is amazing. And the information gathered in that 1 to 2 month process is vital to the design of the facility. That has been very well received by the architect, and to the extent where they were able to do a space analysis based on the needs of the fire department, and the space analysis is also provided in the report. Program deficiencies were worked upon as well for a few weeks to understand where the gaps are in the program and where the gaps are in the facility and how the two interrelate to each other. And that analysis also helps to provide for future data and future information for more robust and efficient fire department. The cost analysis is quite a bit more technical in the way it's listed in the report. The cost analysis is based on what the deficiencies are in the building and in the technical format, and what would be required to meet those deficiencies. A full cost of the facility is premature at this time because we were working on a number of options. The design documents are provided in the report. There's a number of options that were reviewed and analyzed by the committee. And the options analysis, quite frankly, we got to a point where we need direction from council. At this point in the process, the option, we need to get to a decided upon option to move along in the process. So that's part of the reason why we're here tonight. Pros and cons is a very interesting read. The pros and cons analysis explains information about the current facility and what the pros and cons of utilizing the current facility are. I recommend people read that. Through all of that information and the hard work of everybody involved, the architect took the information and presented what they would consider their professional opinion on a preferred option. And that's what we paid $80,000 for. And that's what's in the report for council and the committee to discuss tonight. So as you can see, that's a lot of information, and it's a daunting task for the two committees to digest it all. I really recommend questions and answers tonight would be valuable for the architect who's online to listen in. What was the first question?
No, that's good. That's great. Why don't we start with questions for the architect? Why don't we start with why option 1A? Why the preferred option, Ed? Can you give us the rationale for that? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. There's some of them have already been mentioned, but there's just a number of efficiencies. Number one, there is no interruption to the operations of the Firehall facility if a new facility was built on the adjacent property. So that's number one. So there's no interruption. There's no requirement to have a temporary facility, and that might be obvious. There's also you're left with a asset for your community in the particularly the apparatus bay, but it's not unreasonable to consider other uses for the rest of the existing fire hall. Also, the adjacent property is very well sited, where it's within the community. Its location, it has good street access. It has it's appropriate width to permit returning fire vehicles to go up one side of the building and not interfere with any exiting vehicles. So that's very good street frontage and circulation. Is relatively flat, and that supports everything from limiting the amount of site work required to providing just relatively flat training surfaces and spaces for parking and other uses. So there's quite a few benefits to having the building immediately adjacent to your existing property. It seems like a perfect solution, to be honest. In a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Schuken, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little, for you. The question that, to me, the key question right now is not whether we need a new fire hall. I think that has been said. But the question that's sort of lurking is new apparatus, upgrade the apparatus bay or a new building. What was a powerful concept for me in reading the material is the concept of cost control. And I was wondering if we could ask our architect to maybe get into that a little bit more. And I suspect that there's some significant lived experience at the table here with the concept of cost control. What I have read from it, though, just to sum up, is that if we are to upgrade the existing apparatus bay, we may not know the full cost until we dig into it, and we are likely to spend a lot of money to likely not get to a suitable solution. But I would like to hear from our paid consultant, or our consultant here with the expertise, and also Mr. Hornick as well, and others, if I could.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. Go ahead.
Yeah, at first glance, the apparatus bay seems like quite a robust building that could be easily repurposed. The two structural engineers' assessments point out with a lot of clarity, some of the structural deficiencies. One thing we tried to do in our report was to provide a comparison, what a modern best practice typical apparatus bay would look like in terms of overall size and some of the configurations of some of what we call the operational spaces. So not the admin, not the quarters, but where the firefighters are doing work related to their trade. So it's stark contrast in terms of scale is number one. The building, it's a little unknown in terms of how to quantify the costs. What we tried to do was to identify the shortcomings and do a thorough analysis of the existing building to understand all the parts that needed to be upgraded. We started that with the first thought this would be simply a great opportunity to repurpose and save some money. But as we dug into it, it became quite apparent that there really was a lot of shortcomings in the building. For when it was built, it was likely a great solution and met the needs. But of course, with code changes in time and approaches to firefighting and operations within fire departments, things have changed, and the knowledge base around contamination and so on has there's been a lot of research, and a lot of progress has been made. So what we found, if I'm, let's say, just speaking strictly about costs for upgrading the facility to meet code, we realized that there would be additional design needed by structural engineer among a team of engineers to design in solutions that could then be costed. So at this early stage, we are unable to with certainty say it would cost X dollars or in the range of, because it's some of it would be guesswork, and we don't have a very high comfort level with the type of guesswork we'd have to do. Is hopefully that made some inroads to answering your question.
Councillor Schuken, go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. I wonder if Mr. Hornick might also address that as well. And speaking to the mic, sir.
Thank you. I think the nutshell with the apparatus bay is that if you read the engineer's report, the secondary one from recent, the foundations need heavy upgrading. The wall structures, basically what happens is the wall panels aren't held together enough, so it theoretically needs a concrete skin all the way around the building with rebar anchored into what would be a new foundation we put underneath the existing in key locations, and pour a new concrete wall around the existing building, take the whole roof structure off because it doesn't meet any snow load requirements or seismic requirements, put a new roof structure on top, and steel bracing inside so the walls don't buckle under a seismic activity. Exterior buttress walls on the four corners, which would be east and west walls, east and west corners, to hold the lateral stability because of the garage doors. And that's theoretically what the structural upgrades would be, not to mention all the other mechanical, electrical, ventilation. And so when you dig deep into any renovation, be it residential, commercial, or this being an emergency building is required to be post-disaster, you can't go too far along with any sort of structural upgrades or any heavy renovations without bringing the whole building up to code. So the reality is there's everything needs to be upgraded. The walls need to be upgraded, the foundation needs to be upgraded, the roof needs to be replaced, there needs to be additional reinforcements inside and out, and all the electrical, mechanical, ventilation. There's not much left. Yet it's a good building for another purpose. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the building for a non-emergency purpose, but it's to bring it up to code for its intended use is a little far-fetched in my opinion. And so therefore the costing of that, it's complicated because there would be, you could spend a lot of time, as Ed said, with a lot of different engineers to design a ventilation system, to do an electrical engineer for the electrical system that would have to be replaced and upgraded because you're taking the whole building apart and then putting it back together again. Plumbing system, all the structural requirements, and then get into the costing of it from there. So that's what it would take to get some sort of accurate take on it. And so when you put all that together, it takes, the big killer there is time. So how much time do we spend on that? We've got a $7 million grant potential that I understand we've got a fairly good shot at, that we have to have everything in by September. So if we move forward with option 1A, in a sense, that gives us a fairly easy path forward with a fairly reasonable cost control on, it should be able to achieve that, I think.
Okay, thank you. So Ed, on page 19 of your report, you have a list of the pros and cons of the evaluation of keeping the existing apparatus bay. And so one thing that we haven't talked about is we could keep it and repurpose it for something else. Can you speak to that and then also speak to the pros and cons?
So absolutely. As Mike said, the building itself is structurally sound, but it's just not, of course, as we've been speaking to, meeting the criteria around post-disaster. So, it's a relatively robust building, but again, it's extremely difficult to bring it up to code for the purposes in a firefighting facility. So, it's these buildings they could either be for commercial use, they could for storing your winter equipment for parks or anything. So it's reasonable to change the use of that building for I can see anything vehicle related, and it's great as there's the large overhead doors and so on. So I can see a myriad of uses for a municipality. So I think that has a great potential for continuing its lifespan in a useful manner. The rest of the building, on the other hand, it's debatable what it could be used for, but there is also potential. But there's been some comment on the state of the roof and the water leaking and the age of the building and so on. So repurposing some of the smaller, like the administrative quarter side of the existing building, you might face some challenges, but I think especially with the existing apparatus bay, I would think they have good potential for reuse in another manner. So if I just talk about the pros and cons here for a moment, we really looked at, sorry, did you say page 19? Just bear with me one sec. Do you mean the pros and cons on page 21?
Item number 6.0, pros and cons.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, so I feel like we touched on some of these. Now, in terms of the process of building a new facility, you have an existing fire hall. There's a lot of costs related to temporary relocation and temporary facilities. There's a lot of value in the firefighting equipment, and particularly the large vehicles, and they're not meant to be stored outside. And so it's quite important that you have a covered space, and these large tent structures need to be heated and overhead doors and so on. And you'd have to have that sort of, I just say tent because that's what we've typically worked with in the past. Those sort of structures in place for a year plus as a hall is demolished and then rebuilt, and it's probably more likely in the 14, 15 month range. So there's month after month of costs related to housing the fire staff, including showers and washrooms and meeting space and kitchen space and administrative space and sort of so on. Of course, when we've done temporary facilities in the past, they've been significantly smaller than the fire halls that they're either replacing or going to be, but there's still a lot of pieces to it. And so there's a lot of costs associated with that. And then, of course, you have to find a spot for it. So the fact that by not keeping the existing fire hall, by building on a new site, you can retain some of the fire hall, and you can also operate in it while the other one is building. So uninterrupted operation is probably the biggest consideration. Now, when we get to the cons, there's a myriad of issues as it relates to the existing fire hall, and integrating an existing fire hall into a new facility presents some challenges as well. So, I'm sort of stretching of what the question was asking, but we looked at options which related to keeping some of the fire hall, specifically the apparatus bay, and so even that presented us with some challenges around integrating two different structures and how do you make them connect, how do you make that connection, and it's very unlikely that the new structure would be a concrete box like the existing apparatus bay, and so therefore there's different expansion and contraction and movement reactions for the building. So there's sort of a series of issues that arise. As Mike said, there's a lot of issues with upgrading the building, and so in a nutshell, it just we did that analysis, not with any agenda, but with the aim of trying to present as much actual content as possible. It seemed to come up that there was a lot of limitations with keeping the existing building and with the purpose of reusing it and repurposing it for a new, into the new fire hall. One of the biggest issues, of course, with the fire hall as it exists is not only the shortcomings structurally, but programmatically. We have some diagrams which indicate what the size of a new apparatus bay would be, as I mentioned earlier, in some commentary, versus the existing one. But in addition to that, the overhead doors are too small for the existing equipment. They can get it out, but there's extreme care taken to bring vehicles out in and on the facility. There's clearances around around the vehicles is extremely limited. There's been some of the public speakers have mentioned the decontamination and so on, and lack thereof in the facility. So, all those spaces would have to be migrated out of that apparatus bay and into the new facility. So there's lots of programmatic problems as well as structural problems. So it's a complicated series of reactions to bring this building into a state that could be reused. But having said all that, it is a facility that could be repurposed for other uses.
Okay.
So sometimes I ramble. Hopefully that was.
Yep, that's great. That's great. Councillor Gray.
I just had a question for Mr. Hornick and perhaps for Mr. Craig. And that was, my understanding is under the BC Building Code that if the district were to renovate this building to continue its current purpose, simply the renovation, that we actually have a choice as to how far we go in terms of the code improvements. It's not an automatic requirement. Is that true?
Maybe I could start this one, Mike. So there's a few different pieces to that. In addition to the code, I would find it very unlikely that the consultants would sign off on a building that, with the amount of renovation required, wouldn't fully meet the code. It's interesting because the Vancouver Building Bylaw, which is essentially the BC Building Code with a few minor amendments to it, one thing they do have is a good section on what triggers upgrades and what the state of the upgrades are required. So many municipalities use the triggers section in the Vancouver building bylaw as sort of a basis for understanding what the required upgrades would be in a building. So like your question is how much has to be done and do we have to go all the way? And so we did an analysis of this through the lens of the Vancouver building bylaw, and it was a total upgrade on virtually all systems, electrical, mechanical, structural, and because the building was just that far behind. In terms of the consultant team, I don't think the architects, and I can't speak to the engineers, but our number one priority when we take an oath when when we become an architect is public safety. So it's hard to consider signing off on a building of for this purpose with some of the shortcomings, particularly around life safety.
Okay.
So
Second
I would,
question.
yeah.
Thanks very much. I think the answer is that we do have the ability to build to less than the code, but the issue is figuring that out. My next question was in regard to
Hold
this
on.
one.
I don't think that's what he said. Is that what you said, that we have the ability to build to lesser of a code? I thought we had to build to code.
Well, there is a point, and if we took the apparatus bay as an example, and we wanted to only do some limited upgrades to continue its operation as an apparatus bay within the fire hall, the level of construction required to bring it up to post-disaster, which is a requirement in the code that's very clear for this type of facility, would beyond a doubt and with certainty require full upgrade of the building. I think there is some gray area where authorities having jurisdiction, and I imagine that is council and mayor, are able to say we don't have to meet this part of the code, but then the responsibility is on the shoulders of the authority. So I just express caution with the idea of not fully meeting the code. And the other piece is the codes are continually advancing, and we might end up being significantly further behind in another 6 years when a new code comes out.
Okay. Councillor
So I guess my follow-up question was, I've been looking around, and you've got a heck of a lot more experience, obviously, than someone like me. But when I see fire halls that have been replaced, searching on the web in British Columbia, I have not found anything as new as our building. The ones that have been replaced are about expansion, but actual replacements, Saanich number 2 in 1973, Quadra Island 1970, Nelson's was built in 1913, Nanaimo 1984. They've all been replaced in the last few years. Is there anything in the province that's been replaced, built in the 1990s, that was built for seismic upgrading rather than expansion?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky question because only part of your building was built in the 1990s, just the apparatus bay. Everything else was 50s, 60s, and reno since then. So I don't know of something so recent as 1990. But having said that, I can't speak to the state of the buildings that were renovated and to what extent. I know this particular code from 2018 to 2024, especially with structural consideration, was a big leap. So although you were behind in the previous even 2 years ago, now is a significant jump forward. So in a very short amount of time, all these buildings have been, cast in a spot of when it's time for upgrade to require a significant upgrade.
Thank you.
Councillor Sugar.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I wonder if I could just make a reference to the Skyline engineering report, and I think it's relevant to this discussion right here. I seem to recall in that report there's reference to documentation that was missing in terms of how the apparatus bay was built. Am I correct in that? I believe it. Okay, I believe it to be. I think that the point I guess I would make to this is one of the reasons maybe why we're here now is because the apparatus bay, well, of course, it does not meet standard. So why would we even fathom building something that does not meet the highest standard of the day? I guess that's a big question. But sorry, my more direct question to Ed, to Mr. Hornick. When we go after and plan for a building like this, how long do we expect the lifespan to be? I mean, I brazenly said we need to be building for the next generation and think about 75 years, but what is the lifespan of a building like this?
Sorry, Mike, I'll be brief. We'd expect at least 75 years, and there's a few things. So it's kind of like an athlete that sprints. You know, in the 60s, they were doing it in 12 seconds to 100 meters, and now they're doing it, they only improving by tiny increments. Maybe this is a very poor analogy. Point being is apparatus, the large equipment is only going to get so big. It's kind of maxed out. There's, roads are a certain size. We all live in our certain size. So equipment is not getting bigger. So the idea that apparatus bays will be undersized. They may not be enough apparatus bays, but it's unlikely the building will be undersized to handle equipment growth. And then we try and build in some future expansion potential into the design, whether it's the open spaces on the side to go sideways, or the potential to go up if needed. And when we're dealing with two-story construction, even on a wood frame, it's there's usually potential to go up as well. So there's lots of opportunity for the building to live and have renovations far into the future.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to be talking about some of the engineering discussion points a little later in the agenda, specifically for the architect. Questions about the preferred options. What some of those nitty-gritty. Does the committee or the council have any questions? Brent Donaldson, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Just to get a little context, I can speak for myself from the folks that are at the podium here that I don't think there's anybody at this table that is opposed to building a new fire station. So I just want to make that clear, because certainly I've got a little bit of an impression that that's the case, and certainly it isn't for me. When we're looking at building a new apparatus bay, or what are your recommendations with regard to what you would build it out of? Would it be wood construction, steel? Obviously the concrete one that we have next door here hasn't served us too well if we're only getting 30 years out of it. So, what would you recommend in looking into the future of a building that would last us 75 years? What sort of materials would you think would be acceptable for longevity for a building such as that? Thank you.
Okay, this for me as we consider ourselves sort of a wood first firm. We've had for a number of reasons. Number one, it's for the most part the most sustainable material. Number two, it's readily available and manufactured and sourced in BC often. And number three has a great structural capacity, and even if it's components of the building are conventionally framed, they can easily be incorporated into a post-disaster building. So our envelopes are very robust in terms of, we always pick materials that we have to understand that the intent is to be in operation for up to 75 years. So we're looking at cladding materials and exterior envelope systems that are built for longevity. So we stay away from wood siding and some other materials like that, which lend themselves to decay over the years. So we start from the approach that the building is going to be around for a long time, and we consider the wood first to be in line with that. Now, in terms of steel and concrete, those aren't our favored primary construction materials. They're a little less sustainable, but also along with the steel, there comes a lot of detailing and issues with transfer of heat through the facade. So we have to do it with extreme care. Concrete tends to add a little cost to the project. If you can imagine, suspended slabs and thick walls and so on, and those after that have to be clad and finished inside and out. So it tends to add more cost to do concrete construction. So our approach generally, we've found a lot of success with wood products.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks again. Just getting back to the existing apparatus base, would there be the possibility if we were to look at remodeling them or bringing them up to code, that part of the recommendations in the report regarding the dirty side of the Firehall, decon, gear storage and the like, could that be part of the stabilization of the current structure?
Are you, I'm trying to understand the question. Are you suggesting that using some of the program spaces to structurally support and be part of the upgraded structure of the upgraded apparatus bay?
Yes, so we'd be looking down on the structure from the air. It would be moving into the area where the ALR is. I know there's comments in your report with regard to separation from living spaces and the like, and that if an addition was put on the side of the structure, could that be part of the stabilization from what's the word? Keeping the building from falling over.
Yeah, it would seismically sort of integrate and support the existing building. I think so. Now, I'm not a structural engineer, and there's two pieces to that. I feel like something new would have to be, there's almost two approaches. If it's made of dissimilar materials, like we're proposing wood, likely it would have a gap of some sort between the building, and it would have some separation. I imagine that the design could purposefully include retaining walls and so on that would be perpendicular to the existing apparatus bay that would lend it some of the support, but I could envision that happening, but I can't really speak to would that be a cost savings. It's really a complicated detail that the structural engineers would really have to dive into. Certainly not impossible though.
Thank you.
And I'd like to answer that those options were addressed in the second Skyline report. And yeah, and so you could theoretically do that, and that would maybe take care of 1/4 of the building, or that side that it's taken care of. It is theoretically possible, but it doesn't quite do the entire job.
Yeah, respectfully, the last paragraph of the recent Skyline report did make note that, and obviously we're in an urgency situation with this grant money, so we're moving quicker than I certainly anticipated, but using some other contractor other than the folks that are doing the consulting here to get a bit of an idea on what, the cost would be. Certainly when I got on the committee, my role wasn't to make decisions from an operational point of view, more just to look at it as a taxpayer and a long-term resident and a firefighter for 35 years. So I know the urgency part, and I get that, and a lot of folks are influenced by that. But at the end of the day, I feel that, it's important that we look at that, turn that rock over, and unfortunately, I don't think we have time to do that. But certainly it's noted in the last Skyline report that that could be an option.
Okay. Other questions for the architects? Councillor Donaldson or Epp? Any specific questions for Ed? Okay. Well, thank you, Ed, for being online for that. I appreciate it. Okay.
Pleasure.
Let's move along to the engineering reports. We've got, for the engineering reports, this starts on page 73 of the package. I'm going to ask the fire chief to start us off here. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if there's material in the architect's report that isn't so much architectural, and it's been talked about by the public tonight. And I wondered if we might just pause for a minute about those issues. There's a series of them. The first time we heard tonight, or the council's heard tonight, that there's rats in the fire hall. Never heard about that before, but we've heard about concerns about mold. I'll just take a look at the list I have here. Now, I'm not sure I got it complete. Unsafe storage platform violating work-safe conditions. Inadequate ventilation exposing our firefighters to excess vehicle exhaust. Sleeping quarters in a less adequate seismic building. And then issues around decontamination. So, as a medical doctor, you get concerned about the problems that are facing you right today. And then you've got the issue of problems that may come in the future that may never occur. So an earthquake is kind of like that. We think there may be one, but we don't know what's going to happen. Like someone with heart disease, they may or may not have a heart attack. They may live their full life and die of something else. So I'm kind of concerned that this council take action on the health and safety issues now. If I could ask, and Eric, you're still here, or Ed, you're still here, how long from today, if we said go, when would this building be completed?
I would say best guess is 20 months to 24 months.
2 years. So I don't think we should leave our firefighters exposed in this way. I think we should put in an exhaust system immediately. It was previously approved by previous council, and I don't know if the mayor and Councillor Epp are involved in that. Previously approved and never happened. I think we should put it up there. I would suggest an ATCO trailer, get our guys sleeping, our guys and gals sleeping outside of the building so that they're kept safe. I think the unsafe storage platform, let's take it down or get it up to code. I think waiting 2 years to do this is unfair to our volunteers and staff.
Yeah, I've heard about rats in the fire hall for a long time. As a matter of fact, the staff here are very reluctant to go up to the fire hall because when they did, there was a rat that fell from the ceiling in front of them. So I think the rats in the fire hall is of great concern, and we've known about it for a while. I do agree that we've got many different health and welfare concerns. This compounds this just going to ask the CAO to comment on this, and then Councillor Donaldson.
Oh, sorry, I didn't jump the queue, I hope. Maybe a question for Mike or the architect. If we were to look at the ventilation system or the HVAC, or look at some other like fundamental parts of the building to make it safe currently, would that trigger a full building code requirement for the building? Is there a trigger point when you start working on a building that you have to meet suddenly? Oh, you're working on a building, you have to now meet code.
I wouldn't think of a ventilation system specific to that. You'd get the rodents out of there and maybe do some mold removal. That I wouldn't see that triggering any serious event of code compliance at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. The issue of mold we've heard for a very long time. I'm surprised it still is an issue. When we dealt with, they call it the leaky condo for years and years, and it all got taken care of. So we've known about that for quite some time. Rats can be dealt with as well. The one concern I had as well, having been affiliated with fire departments, is the exhaust. And a number of years ago, just as a citizen who used to go to all sorts of budget meetings, this was something that was brought forward by our fire chief. And I never understood why we never implemented it, although there was a councillor at the time who said, no, don't do that. We have applied for so many grants over the years that this has never actually come back to us, at least in this term. It's never come out of budget meeting in the ones that I've been to. So I'm not sure why we've allowed it to get so bad. And yes, some of these things we can deal with. It probably wouldn't, it's day-to-day stuff. So to keep people safe today and not wait another moment longer, we have the financing to be able to do that, or the funds to do that. So those minor details we should deal with now, so that people are comfortable being in that building, coming and going. I don't think that it's a huge cost. It does certainly, and I'm not an expert in this, but would probably not interfere with this project that we're talking about tonight. So if people are feeling that insecure, we need to deal with it today, not 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years from now. And not to be the total cost for a rebuild. I mean, that's important as well. But those are immediate things that we have the ability to deal with today.
Okay, thank you. Fire Chief, could you comment on the exhaust system and why that hasn't been fixed?
Yes, thank you. And maybe a few of the other items as well, if that's possible. So the issue with the exhaust, we have, it's always been a concern for us. We did have WorkSafe out to recommend. It's always been promised to us that we were eventually going to be getting a new fire hall. We've had that. Yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. We're putting money away in the fund. Great. So at the time, we brought WorkSafe out to make some recommendations, and he suggested doing what we are doing now, and that is we have a policy that before any apparatus starts, we open the bay doors. And we have monitors in the ceiling around to monitor, and an automatic. We do have some extractors there, but they don't actually attach to the exhaust. So we have, this Band-Aid until such time as we actually get a new vehicle extraction system or exhaust extraction system. They do run, if we were to buy and completely install in there, you're looking at around the $250,000 mark. So that's what it would cost to install, for example, a Niederman in there. So as far as the mold and the rats, it's been ongoing problems. We brought somebody in to test for mold. We did do a few of the mitigation recommendations. The challenge is that we have the roof continually leaks. There's continually moisture in there. So the mold will continually grow. We have asked to have the roof replaced, and many and this is going back now several years. At the time, roofers didn't want to touch the roof because it was so bad. So we've done, again, a little bit of repair, Band-Aids, you know, put a little goo here and there and stop the leaks. But the water still leaks in. It needs a full replacement of the roof. And with that now, potentially even some of the trusses inside, they're starting to rot. So, I mean, it's not so easy just to say we can just start this. It's once you crack that open, you might find some other things that are in there. And again, I go back to, there hasn't been the desire previously based on communication I've had with previous councils to move forward with the new fire hall or to actually put any money into repairing the fire hall as it sits right now. So it is not that I haven't tried, and it's not that I don't care about the safety of my firefighters at all. It's just been a struggle.
Can I re-ask my question, Chair? So
Yes.
in the line of what the chief just said, if we start down the process of mold remediation and then find out that we have to replace trusses and whatever else, what's the trigger? When do we trigger a building code compliance? Like, at what point does that happen? I know it happens at a certain point, but when does that happen?
Okay, Councillor Gray.
I think the answer to that is that it's up to the district under the provincial building code to decide how far if you need to meet the building code requirements, and you can set it at the district level. But so we could focus on mold, but I think we heard about unsafe storage platforms. I'll just go through the list. The decontamination issues, we need a bathroom that people, when I'm reading, a washroom where people can have a shower and get their uniforms off. Inadequate ventilation for the vehicle exhaust, and sleeping quarters in a non-safe seismic building. I think they demand action now.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Malco, go ahead.
So I'm Steve Malco. I've been a structural engineer since 2006. The answer is 5%. We can modify or add a doorway, and we can affect the seismic capacity of a building by 5%. And after that, we need to make seismic accommodations. We need to add shear walls. We need to take considerations. With respect to the HVAC adding stuff, as soon as you do that, we need to consider the additional loads. So the Niederman, yes, there's a cost for that, but we have 2 reports that discuss the inadequacy of the existing roof. So we can't start bolting anything to it. It's inadequate. All these components need a professional to stand behind. No professionals will stand behind something if they aren't, like I won't, unless I'm confident that the existing structure can support it and carry it down to the foundation. So we're looking at bits and pieces, but the actual implementation of it, when you start bringing professionals in to actually implement this, it becomes quite, that's where the whole thing expands into a full renovation.
And so one of the things we could do is rent or buy a portable for sleeping quarters and for the administration who are there 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and to get them out of the old part of the building temporarily before we have a new fire hall rebuilt.
Sure, that's a possibility. What I'm sort of suggesting is that any upgrades to this existing structure would likely incur like substantial structural upgrades too, in order just to add these small components that we're discussing.
And what about the decontamination? How could we mitigate that? How can we fix that issue right now in the interim before we have a new fire hall?
I couldn't speak to that as structural.
Okay.
Be more for that.
Councillor
Yeah, ATCO trailer. You know, we have around the province work camps that have all the functions of that we're talking about, all done with trailers. I just think so I just don't want us to stop and say, oh, guess we can't do it. So no, let's take a look at this. Let's see what we can do. I was listening tonight what people were saying. I've heard before about some concerns. It seems to me we should be acting on them rather than waiting a couple of years. That's these young people here for another couple of years being exposed to a way that maybe they shouldn't be. Unless perhaps what we heard from the chief a moment ago, that we can relax about the ventilation because WorkSafe has told us how to do it, and then let's just follow their ideas what they've told us to do, and let's make a note of that in our report that that's taken care of. I think it's one or the other.
Councillor Gray, or Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Little. As important as this topic is, it's a topic that we're not here to talk about. We're here to talk about proceeding with a new hall or not, or a modification of that. That is where the fundamental question lies. I would suggest that Councillor Gray, if he wants to bring this forward in an orderly way, maybe brings it back to one of our meetings and we can talk about mitigation efforts. I think it is important, and maybe there's things we can do, but the issue before us right now is moving ahead with a plan. And again, if that had been done 2 years ago, 10 years ago, we would be on much better ground. We wouldn't even be talking about some of the health and safety issues. So I think we should focus on that. If there's some of these other questions, we can bring them back. I would suggest bringing them back separately.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I had a discussion with the fire chief and the CAO in the interim. We've got some more meetings coming up. We can bring it back. Yeah.
Sorry, my intention was not to be disorderly, but rather address the problems presented to us tonight. And many of these issues are justifications for building of the hall, so they're entirely appropriate to be discussing this evening, in my view.
Okay, so let's get back to the agenda. This gets back to what we have on the agenda.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Just to say, these issues are dealt with in the documents that we're looking at. And we heard tonight from people about their health and safety issues. It's not about getting back to our agenda. This is part of the agenda, it seems.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't think there's anybody at this table or even in this room that is not concerned about the welfare of the firefighters. We will do something. And as opposed to pointing fingers and being negative, I want to commend this council for moving this forward, because past councils have done the opposite. They've moved it down the line for other councils to deal with. So these are difficult discussions. I understand that, but difficult discussions need to be had, and we need to talk about the safety and welfare of our firefighters in the future and today. I've just said that I will speak to the CAO and the fire chief, and we will bring back a line item to talk about the safety and welfare of the firefighters today. So Fire Chief Dunlop, can we move along to the engineering reports? If you could introduce that, and then perhaps Mr. Malco can speak to that specifically. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I guess we're going to review the Skyline engineering report of April 22nd, and the second report from Skyline on May 24th, and the Ryzuk Geotechnical report on April 19th. And I am going to defer to Steve Malkow, the engineer, who can speak to this much more clearly than I can.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. So as part of the steering committee, we wanted to know kind of where the fire hall as it is right now, where it sits, and where are we at structurally with it. Chief had a report completed on the older structure. It was pretty unequivocally, there's no seismic consideration in the old part of the building. There's no, it was more or less condemned at that point, and that was early days report that was completed. So that to the steering committee was a non-issue as far as the old portion, and our attention turned to the apparatus bay. And the question was, what is its current condition and where does it sit? And so in relation to that, we engaged Skyline Engineering. Mike worked with them, and they did a review of the existing apparatus bay and provided the report. That initial report was in 2022. That's under the old British Columbia Building Code. And at that time, they identified a number of issues with the existing bay with respect to the gravity loading and the seismic loading of that. Those issues include like the trusses being insufficient, that it doesn't meet post-disaster loading under any current building codes. It's debatable. There is a paragraph in reference to Brent's question, that almost no documentation was available, even really from that original structure, to determine what standard, even in 1993, it was built to. So there's quite a few unknowns with that existing building. That's in the original report. That was 2022. After that was completed, we had a building code change and an upgrade. The new 2024 British Columbia Building Code has substantially higher seismic criteria. It results in a substantially more well-designed building that's required to meet those criteria. You have to add a lot more structure in there to make it work. Skyline basically reviewed that original report and then added in their new information now, basically describing how difficult it would be to achieve any upgrades to meet these new building code requirements. Again, that's the design of the roof system, the connection to the walls, the wall connections to each other, and then the connection down to the foundation. Taking the report as a whole, they I think did a good job of just describing how extensive those upgrades would be in order for that building to meet the current 2024 building code. As a professional, that's our standard that we work to. We don't have any other standards that there's additional that might be higher, but that's our minimum. The British Columbia Building Code is our minimum standard that we need to work to. So when we're looking at any kind of renovation or any kind of new construction, we need to make sure that if there's something existing there, that we're either well away from it so it doesn't affect our new structure, or that it's completely able to withstand these new code forces. So hopefully that helps.
Councillor Donaldson.
I have two questions for Mr. Malco. How often does the BC Building Code change?
We would see a change every 4 to 5 years, roughly. So 2018, the prior one was 2012, so about 6 years.
Regardless if it's a commercial, fire, emergency, or residential?
So the way it works is there's actually the National Building Code is upgrades every on that time frame, and BC follows shortly behind. So then we adopt the National Building Code with some slight adjustments. And then further, like Vancouver will pull from that as well and put in their unique requirements.
Okay, so in my next question, both Skyline reports are very, very close in verbiage. And so my question is, did they actually come out and see it, or did they base it on all of the literature and the research that is available to them? And one of the things that keeps catching my eye is where they say you may wish to have a more detailed schematics, seismic upgrade plan prepared with sufficient details, such as a qualified general contractor or qualified surveyor could provide order of magnitude costs, etc. Can they not do that? Or do we, or is this something that we should, maybe it's something advisable, because they've said it twice now.
So that paragraph is just, we provide these services. The first part of the question is, my understanding is they came out for the first report, did their analysis of the building and the components. None of those components were changed after that. So there's no need for a second. You know, if we had done some modifications or there had been some kind of change in the actual site, it would be understandable they would attend again. They did not, is my understanding. What changed in that time was the building code, and so we had them redo the letter. Just we do want to make sure that you know, with the new building code where it now stands. Second to the schematics, you know, everything is all about the details and connections. So every little piece in there would have to be designed and looked at, and that's what they're sort of offering to get into.
Okay, Mike.
I just wanted to add to that secondary to him looking at the design forces for the updated code we looked at the different building design concepts that JDA had provided for us to see if they would do exactly what Brent was asking about. If we could put a new building beside this old building and, you know, bolt it together really well, would that help hold it up? And so that was the advanced and more elaborate report secondarily that came.
Thank you. The reason I ask is because there are other fire departments who have done just that. So one of the older than ours, which is Sandwich number 1, has been reinforced, and it's a 2-story. The other ones now that they are replacing. So because our apparatus bay is just shy of 30 years, it's still the newest building we have here. Mind you, it is an emergency building. So I'm just trying to comprehend from a layperson's perspective. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Steve.
With respect to that too, those forces would need to get to that new structure. So Skyline has identified that there's deficiencies in the building as far as the connections between the existing roofs. So aside from the gravity loading, we would need to upgrade the existing truss system, which given the spans would be quite onerous. The connections would still all need to be upgraded. It's not as simple as just putting the new structure there to hold up this old one. Those forces all have to be able to be directed to that. So one way or another, you would need to do fairly substantial upgrades to that existing. It's in order to transfer them over to that building.
Bruce.
And we still haven't addressed the idea that just fixing the existing structure doesn't allow for the future discussion. Equipment, it's inadequate as it is now in terms of door width. We haven't talked about that. Those sorts of things that would be in addition to making it more seismically sound as it stands right now. But it doesn't address the actual needs of the department moving forward.
Good point. Anybody else want to ask any questions of Steve or anybody else at this table regarding the reports, the Ryzuk report? Go ahead, Steve.
So that was Skyline. We also, before we, as a steering committee, we knew that the existing site made the most sense, just it's central in the community and it's worked well for years. What we wanted to know out of the gate was what is below and is it suitable for the new structure. There's no point in having these conversations getting way down the road and then finding out there's a major geotechnical issue. So the steering committee chose to retain Ryzuk Engineering. They're a local geotechnical firm. They're well known and they're excellent at their job. They did a drill test program, so it's not just a surface look, it's down to bedrock, and they compiled a report. That report basically with the exception of bedrock would be the only better material you could possibly want to build on. It recommends shallow foundations. They're 1.5 meters deep. We don't need to drill piles. We don't need any excessive kind of geotechnical preloading. The bearing capacities were excellent that they provided. Now, keep in mind, this is all for an older building code because now we're into the new one. But at the time, everything came back as a very glowing review of the site, which bodes well for a new structure to sit there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shukin.
So, question to Mr. Malco. Thank you very much for being here and for your expertise. The geotechnical work that was done, I'm assuming it didn't go over to the ALR side of the fields. And if it didn't, can we still base, a sense of whether we can use the field on that information?
I would expect, in geotechnical terms, and I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but generally things don't change immediately in a couple hundred feet. It's a geological formation. So what we find in one place, we could, a few hundred feet over, infer that it would be similar. The depth of bedrock can change that sort of, but fortunately, given the soils that are directly under it, that's not a major concern for the site. So provided that they would, you know, they would still do a full geotechnical survey if that was the new chosen spot to create a new design. We would have to, obviously, but we can infer based on the existing data that we have, at least that we know where there's a very high probability of a very good site to build on.
Okay. Any other comments regarding the Skyline report or the Ryzuk report, or any questions to the fire chief at this time? Yeah, Councillor Epp.
I just wondered, you know, how green would this new building be on the environmental standards? How green, like, you know, what level, like with the step code, and how, you know, is that included in the new building code?
I would direct that question to Ed, but in general, LEED and all those are included. The step code has increased substantially in this.
Yeah, Ed, could you comment on that, on how green, I guess it can be as green as we want it to be, but could you comment on how environmentally friendly the new build could be or would be? Oh, we can't hear you.
Thank you, I was muted. Absolutely. The step code is sort of, I would call it a moving target, but initially just applied to residential, and now it's branching out. It's really how the municipality adopts the step code, and we would design to meet targets that your community wishes us to meet, such as a couple examples are, you know, net zero energy. So we could create a building and design a building that is energy surplus, and for the most part that's done using photovoltaic panels or solar panels or geothermal or so on, but that's quite achievable. And you know, another approach is net zero carbon, and so you know, we can do that through thorough selection of materials and so on. Often wood is a good use of that, and taking gas out of the sort of scope of the project and powering it strictly through electricity. In terms of materials, as I mentioned, we preference work with wood, mass timber, and otherwise. So we can always use materials that are manufactured close, have the least you know, negative impact, have more recycled content, and we can work that into our specifications, from everything from you know, infill indoors to metal materials, including any stud work or so on. So there's and gypsum wallboard as well. So there's lots of ways to green your project. Energy is one, and maybe staying away from gas is another. We would take direction from the team.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bray.
I had a question about the Ryzuk engineering report, and I think I'm reading it properly to say that so they looked at this in 2022, but when I look at the drawings that were made by the consultant JDA Architecture, it looks like they were talking about option 6. And that caught my eye because this option looks like, well, it's the same footprint, but the way it's described in Ryzuk engineering was the idea that you knock down the administration building, you put the apparatus bay up. Meantime, the current apparatus bay is functioning. Then once the new apparatus bay is completed, then the existing apparatus bay becomes the admin building. And that's what I see as option 6. So I'm interested in learning more about that option. I know tonight, but the point being that looks quite attractive in terms of continual use of the apparatus bay and keeping it on the same site and reusing the building. One of the problems with the option, the preferred option so-called, is that it leaves us with 2 buildings that we probably don't need, and maintaining and keeping them going and tearing them down is sort of an anti-climate thing if we don't do something else. So that one is, I find, quite interesting and appealing.
Yeah, Ed, could you speak to option 6?
Certainly. And yeah, sorry, I shouldn't say yeah. There was a lot of interest and our approach really was to explore as far as we could the reuse of the existing apparatus bay, because we understood that it was relatively new and had some potential. So we looked at options such as this. Clearly, you can see by the scale of the new apparatus bay, if you're looking at option 6, it's approximately twice the size of the existing apparatus bay. So clearly, the existing there was an opportunity not to be used as an apparatus bay, but as a altered version. So we would expect that there would be, as outlined in the structural analysis and assessments, a significant work done to the apparatus bay to convert it to any reuse, whether it's apparatus or administrative or operational sort of program spaces. We did feel there was some opportunity to use it, but it would, of course, as I seem to be stating, require a significant amount of work, including, removing the roof, making it taller, foundation work, all sorts of things. This might be one of the ones where there's an opportunity to work the new build into supporting the existing somewhat. I'm obviously not a structural engineer, so some of my comments, the structural engineer might roll his eyes, but we wanted to explore all options and not just carte blanche dismiss the apparatus bay as unusable. So if there was a situation where the ALR land was not available, this could be an option that would be worthy of some consideration.
Thank you. And I think it's worthy to note that in the Skyline report, in the summary, talking about reusing the fire or the bay area and modifying it to code to be used as a bay area, it does state that the cost of the upgrades is anticipated to be significant and could very well approach the cost of a new replacement building serving the same purpose. Do you agree with that? Is that a fair question? Do you agree with that statement? That seems like a logical thing.
If you're asking me from the analysis and from the structural engineers analysis, I'd say yes, absolutely. I just feel there's some obvious upgrades that have been outlined, and then there's a whole series of unknowns, and that's also been identified. So I wouldn't feel comfortable to say it would be less expensive than a brand new, even though it may be. But there's just
and so option 6 was designed if we were to use the existing apparatus bay as an apparatus bay with new additions.
Yeah, so option 6, to repurpose the existing apparatus bay into different programmed use, not apparatus bay. So I don't know if you have it on the screen somewhere, but you can see the apparatus bay to the left, and the yellow represents sort of administrative quarters.
Okay.
It would have to be housed with functions that are not critical post-disaster.
Yeah. Okay, Steve.
So just to speak to that, as the steering committee, we initially started with our geotechnical survey just to find out if this site is even appropriate. Skyline also needed that information in order to complete their analysis. So depending on the soil types, if they're softer, then your seismic hazard goes up quite substantially. Soft soils are really bad for structures. So before we started engaging them, we wanted to know where we sat, but ground-wise, and that's why you'll see the report was April 19, 2022, and Skylines is May 24, 2022. This Ryzuk direction just came from that kind of initial direction that the steering committee was sort of understood might happen, and that's why that's sort of.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, I hadn't really looked at that one in particular. I did look at a couple others that were also attractive on the same site, because I had been following those earlier reports as a citizen and was very respectful for the amount that kind of work and forethought. The one question I do have, if it is to remain on the same site or not, it seems that with the drawings that I've seen, the concept drawings, that part of the building is 2-story and part of it is not. Is there a reason why we wouldn't have the whole building 2 stories? And I imagine it would be more environmental, easier to heat.
Steve, do you want to take that?
Sure. Just from a structural perspective, the office admin area is smaller span, so it's easier to support 2 stories in an economical way. Once you get into the apparatus bay with longer spans, you can have an additional story up above, but you need quite a bit of space for your apparatus, the minimum amount of columns or posts. So in doing that, although the one side is 2 stories, the other side is a taller, more similar to a warehouse for holding the apparatus with large open spaces.
Right.
So putting space above that, while feasible, is substantially more loading than just no loading.
And the reason I ask that is Nanaimo just built one, and that's exactly what they did. And so they have classrooms, dorms, whatever upstairs. I think Couch is done similarly. It's much bigger building, but it's all 2-story as well. So there are examples out there. I'm just wondering, is that something that we can consider and use that space that's there? I understand what you're saying.
It really comes down to if you can't go out, then you would go up, and it's that cost benefit analysis between that as they develop the design.
I think a good example of that is the new fire hall in Victoria on Pandora. So it's a new fire hall, and then above they have 6 floors of housing. So they didn't have the option of moving out horizontally. So yeah,
it's a more environmental sound footprint, say.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about the engineering or comments? Go ahead.
Just a quick question, just further to Councillor Donaldson's question. So I understand we have a lot of space here in Metchosin. We've got acreages here, and we've got a large building lot next door. So I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the Couch and Bay Fire Department, but they have built apparatus bays and then their offices above. And maybe I missed what Steve said here, but from an economical point of view, is it better to have just 1-story buildings, apparatus, administration side by each rather than stacking?
I think what we found is it's most economical to not build over the apparatus bay where possible. As your structural engineer has mentioned, large spans within an apparatus bay would contribute to sizable structure required to support any stories on top. We have done that as well in sites that are relatively small, where the option was, like some of the examples mentioned, was only to build up. But what we really found is for access into the apparatus bay and fastest movement for the firefighting staff, it's easier to go adjacent and into the apparatus bay, then through stairs and down. Well, you know, all these configurations work, but I think it would. Our approach, if we were to consider going above, would to have some preliminary costing done as a maybe a class D or an initial costing to compare it to another configuration. So maybe have two options costed, one that was sort of apparatus bays with admin and quarters to the side, and then apparatus bay with some space built over, so we could really compare.
Okay.
So your colleague that came out last Monday and gave a presentation to the citizens and council, I believe the question was asked, and certainly my position on the committee is to be mindful of expenditures and taxation. And maybe just for the folks that are here that weren't at the meeting last week, projected costs per square foot. Certainly my old employer, they're building a training center in Firehall, and their initial cost 2 years ago were 26 million, and they're at 44 now, and they're not done. So I think from a citizen and a member of this committee, I think it's important that we have a clear understanding of what this is going to cost. I know a lot of folks, like, there's no end to what we're going to do to protect our folks, but at the end of the day, I think we have to be realistic on, because we have other business that this municipality has to do, roads, RCMP, those sort of things. And certainly the fire department, in my opinion, is a high priority. But what is your sense, you know, at looking at this building and in those costs, does it cover sewage systems and parking lots and that sort of thing that are going to be required for a new site and a new building?
So, number one, that was me last week or on Monday. I gave the presentation. The in terms of costs, part of the feasibility study is we have to coordinate a Class D with a cost consultant for an option as part of our report. So that is something that's coming. So we will have a professional cost estimator put a budget together for one of our options, whichever one we're directed to have them cost out. So at the end of this process, there will be a detailed costing analysis of whatever option we decide that can be taken away and digested.
Just continue. How about cost overruns in general? I know I mentioned about Saanich going over on their estimate. Being a small municipality, we only have so many people paying into the coffers. So is there usually a percentage that it's given to cost overruns? There's, 10%, 5%, or whatever the case may be.
Well, at the initial, so, typically we see cost estimates in the, they label them as A, B, C, and D. And D is something that we would be able to do on of a very preliminary concept, such as, we've provided. Built into that, because there's a significant amount of unknowns at the earliest stages, are contingencies, and their contingencies are fairly high. And so as the detailed design progresses and you get to a point where you could do a higher level of costing, you reduce the contingencies generally because there's more questions answered about assemblies and construction and so on. So what we found is as we go through the processes, if we find in terms of, if we were, let's say, hired to do working drawings or construction documentation for one of the options, we would have it costed a couple times through that process. And what we find is if we are trending in the direction of over, we would figure a way to cut back, whether that's through materials or scope or what have you. So that's one way of maintaining and keeping our eye on the costs. The other way is if we're going to, in the end, if you're going to have a competitive bidding process like a STIP sum, ensure there's a vetted competition, so you're getting enough interested parties that are giving you a proper bid. And then it's critical that the consultant team produce a thorough set of drawings covering a very well detailed package. And then on top of that, there's always there should be a contingency as part of the budget. So if it came in, and I'm just going to say, for being a nice number, $10 million, you should probably carry contingency in 5 to 10%, just in your back pocket, because there's often a lot of unknowns. If everyone who's built a building understands, there's always surprises.
And just finally, sorry. So there is a timeline that the district's looking at for funding from the province, and it's a substantial sum, if you've probably heard, in the neighborhood of about $7 million. So if we needed some costing, what would the timeline be if we pulled the trigger tomorrow on getting that information, so that if we did apply for these grants, that, would we be in time for September the 15th when the cutoff is, or is that ambitious?
No, I think that's totally reasonable, and we've been asked that question already. We've worked with a few different professional cost estimators, and they are quantity surveyors, and they have always been in the range of Class D level estimate of approaching 3 weeks. So we would need a bit of time, a week or two, to put together the information. In addition to these schematic diagrams for them, because they'd want to have an idea about wall assemblies and general construction, and then they would take that away and spend, I would say, 3 weeks. So we're looking at a month and a week or so to have that costing completed.
Yeah,
so well within the time frame.
That is correct, Brent. With the grant, we need a completed online application form, the attached feasibility study and/or design report, a detailed cost estimate template, a map or drawings, project budget, current council or board resolution indicating support for the proposed activities, and a willingness to provide overall grant management and own force, labor, and or equipment requests. So those are requirements of the grant for September 12th. Councillor Gray.
Just want to confirm the Class D price that we get is plus or minus 50%. So in your example, if it was 10 million, it would be somewhere between 5 and 15 million in the end, or that's what the estimate's giving us?
I didn't realize that 50% sounds extreme, but that could be.
Thank you. The other thing that I'm curious about in your experience, we had a request for proposal at the very beginning that council looked at, and you were the successful contractor. And I was under the perhaps misapprehension that there would be costs associated with various options, so we might choose between them. Thinking if you're going to sell me you had 2 cars for sale, I'd need to know the price to say, well, that's my preferred option. And I realize here you've gotten to it through a different method, but I would be much appreciative to see the cost estimate of some type between some of these options that have been presented.
Yeah, I think maybe that's fair to have a couple priced, but I don't think we would have them all priced. What our experience is at this level, we're building, if we're repurposing the apparatus bay and building, the rest is one thing. If we're building a 1 or 2 story, at the Class D level, there's going to be some there's going to be some commentary within the county surveyor's report, but I don't feel it's going to be significant. So I think if we're costing out any of these options, they're probably within 5% of each other in terms of overall. So I think if we were to do a couple options, you would find there's not in terms of budgeting, there's not a significant difference.
And that was, I think, what Skyline said about, or perhaps yourself, about renovating the existing apparatus bay. It might cost the same as a new building.
And I frankly, I think when they come to a renovation, they will err on the side of being conservative. And the more I think about it here, is the cost it will put down, because there's a lot of uncertainty around the existing apparatus bay would be even higher.
Thank you. I'm not just thinking about myself, I suppose, but I imagine this whole question would go to a referendum. Probably not the people on the table making the decision, but at some point, the public will be wanting to know things like the cost of different options.
Go ahead, Bruce.
So with regard to the grant, if we got it successfully, how long would it remain in force or available to us? And the second thing would be, and the reason I'm asking that is because how long will it take to get a variance on the ALR land if that was the option that council chose? Would the grant still be available in whatever period of time? Stephanie's nodding her head.
Yeah, CEO Payette.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. The grant decision process would take 6 months to a year, and then typically a 2-year window for expenditure plus another year extension possibly. So there would be time. ALR, someone spoke more eloquently than I on ALR tonight, but I have a little bit of ALR information that's in the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll speak to that later on. No, that's fine. Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. Go ahead, Councillor Shukin.
Thanks, Mayor Little. Just as we're on the topic of the grant, 7 million has been thrown out a number of times.
Up to
7 million. Okay, that was my question. I wasn't expecting it would be 7 million. I looked at some of the past grant applications and they're all over the place, big and small and all that. So yeah, just okay.
Okay, and just for everybody's information, at our Monday night meeting, our CFO, Jeffrey Creek, has prepared a financial analysis of what we have available. And so he'll bring that to the Monday meeting. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Shukin, then Councillor Gray.
Mayor Little, I have some questions generally, which I was hoping to get from Mr. Hornick and actually Chief Dunlop as well, and Mr. Payette, of course. But they are pretty general. I'm just kind of wondering where we're at.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay.
That's what this meeting's for, go ahead.
Yeah, and and the time maybe is right, actually. So, Mr. Hornick, thank you for your report, and it was interesting to see the 4 issues you want us to address. And sounds like we're going to try and make some effort to address them on Monday. If you got clarity on those,
Could I ask everybody, including the podium, to turn off your mics when you're not speaking? That's great. Yeah, turn them off. Okay.
I think that would basically conclude the feasibility study at that point. We would have, well, maybe not quite. There would still be the few other answers in the RFP, but that would get us to the finish line on this stage of it, which is very conceptual. Beyond that would have to go to, there'd be getting into construction drawings and stuff like that. Yeah.
So we're still in this process. The one thing I guess I just want to flag, which goes back, is
Just let's pause for a moment. My microphone's working. Is yours working?
Check.
This right here? There you go.
We're just going to take a 5-minute break. Does your microphone work, Brent? Everybody's microphone works?
Test, yeah.
We're just going to continue with a 4-minute break. We'll resume in 4 minutes. Okay, thank you for that brief. We're just going to continue the June 5th, 2025 special committee meeting of the whole. We took a minor break, and do we have any more questions regarding the engineering or the Skyline reports or for the architects? Councillor Shukin.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Little. I just wanted to rephrase my question, I guess. So to Mr. Hornick, we make decisions on Monday and get the green light to go one direction or another. And I guess my question to you is, where are we at in the process at that point? Sorry, and you were starting to answer and then got kind of cut off, but.
Yeah, and I think where we're at with that is to get the answers, the two major answers, which is which site do we build on and which option are we choosing, and whether or not we go to the get an ALC application, which is, I think no matter what option we do, I think we need an ALC application for temporary facilities and whatnot. But that would allow us to proceed and continue with the feasibility study, and I think be fairly close to completing the feasibility study portion of the project.
Okay.
There may be some other stuff that we want to look at. There was talk of housing components and so on within the RFP, and I don't think we're just quite at that stage yet. So that would most likely happen sort of secondary to this, but I think the urgency would be to get the study completed to a state where we can apply for the application for the grant.
Great. Right. Great. Thank you. Perfect.
Councillor Gray.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask something different, but through the chair, Mr. Hornick, the housing component, we heard from the architect that that would be very expensive and sounded like prohibitive. Are you thinking there's some light still there?
I think that it was part of the RFP, and it doesn't necessarily have to. We don't necessarily have to go down that path, but I think it was something that we're still looking at doing as a committee. I think that was part of our thoughts back when.
Thank you.
Just to note that the whole idea of including housing was a significant financial gain for the district. That there were many grants available for that type of facility that would include housing. That was particularly why we were interested in that.
Yes, I recall. I guess what I'm thinking now is so just to be clear, I had a peek at the agenda for money, and the public should know there are two motions coming to the table. One is to for the council to recommend that the council direct the CAO to move the entire 4550 Happy Valley Road out of the ALR. And the second motion I saw on the agenda package was approving the what's called here the preferred option. So how would we approve the preferred option if there's housing involved? When would we get the price of the housing and figure that out?
I think the housing component, if it was to move forward, would be secondary to the building. I don't think you would want to, if you attach housing onto the building, I believe it would have to meet post-disaster standards as well. Is that right, Steve? Correct.
So where would the housing sit on the preferred option? Which page is that on?
That isn't in the design. That isn't in the design. That hasn't been considered. And as the chair of the feasibility study just mentioned, that would be secondary.
Yes, I'm just asking where on the footprint, the new footprint, would it sit in the parking lot or?
We haven't looked at that. The architect hasn't.
So we would approve this option, and then where would the housing go is the question I'm asking.
Steve, go ahead.
Sure. So as a steering committee, we were trying to provide all options for funding for the project. And one of those included CMHC funding, which depending on what type and what level of housing can fund some. does need to be attached and it does need to be post-disaster, So at some time ago, direction was to not proceed much further forward with the exploration of the housing component, although it was included in the RFP. And at that point, we just continued forward with just the straight fire hall design to keep things streamlined, to not get bogged down with a housing component that was undefined and didn't really have a scope attached to it. So in order to just move forward with JDA and the feasibility study, we just pulled back on the housing part, left that alone, and continued forward.
Understood. Maybe this goes back to the question. I was surprised to see this on the agenda on Monday, of course. I don't know if the recommendation comes from the committee or from the subcommittee, but it's on the agenda. And I don't understand how we choose between options if we don't have a full picture of what's going on and the costs associated with it. It sounds like at least a couple of options. And I would like to see us actually hearing this new news, or the news that housing may be back on the agenda, how that fits with the grant, how we roll that into the grant that people want to apply for by September. Moreover, it seemed to me that once we start having layers of development here, we should do what's called the discounted cash flow analysis of the options, including the housing, before we make a decision. I think to do otherwise might be irresponsible.
One of the problems that we might be running up against is those grants were available 2 years ago. There has been an amazing uptake in BC Build grants, and they're already over subscribed. So there's going to be a slowdown or there is a stop of those BC Build grants. I'm doubtful whether the CMHC grants would be still available, but we would have to check that we'd need to reassess that. But we can discuss that if that is a route that council decides to go to. Councillor Shukin.
Thank you, Mayor Little. From my own perspective and just reading the material, understanding where the process has come to date, how complicated it is to even get us here, my sense is that housing is no longer a consideration for this. My sense is also that we had best get ourselves ready to apply for that grant. We don't want to be, driven to an outcome simply because a grant exists. However, as I understand it, this one may be so substantive and material to the future of this project that we really need to take advantage of what's before us. And with that, I just do not see housing being a part of this project any further. And I think we should all be fine with that. The one thing I will also suggest is, we do have to keep options open. If we apply for the grant and we find if we get 7 million, we may get 2 or 3 million or something like that. And then we have to reassess. So it's, I think we need to move, but still understand that we are in a process of understanding what we're going to build. So thank you.
So if we were to be granted 2 or 3 million, there is this thing called borrowing. We all have mortgages. Well, many of us have mortgages. It is a very common thing, and it's very common in municipalities. Many municipalities would love to have no debt. We have no debt. The interest rates are low. I think it's like 2.7. We could get better with that with the municipal financing, the MFA. So let's discuss that at a later date in terms of what we have available and what we would need for potentially the new fire hall. And as I say, the CFO is bringing back a report on Monday night on what we have in hand. Councillor Gray.
Thanks for that. I think as one of the committee mentioned early on in the meeting, there's one thing about what we would like to have, and the other is what we're able to afford. And so for me, getting a few options that we can present to the public, as I say, discounted cash flow analysis to show us the difference in today's dollars People often say it'll be more expensive in the future. Not necessarily so. Do the analysis and find out. And also if you're phasing a project, which at least one of the options I was interested in looks like a kind of a phasing process that may work well for us. The question I wanted to ask now though was about the public involvement. So we have one letter here from Frank Mitchell, talking about we got to get the public input going. We had a commitment made the other night when we met Mayor Little, yourself, about the public involvement, lots of opportunity. We seem to be doing this like last week, this week, and on Monday. It's like, wait a minute, where's the public opportunity? People spoke tonight, I understand that. But we also, I recall hearing from the CEO when we let the RFP that the actual feasibility study included public participation at the beginning or the middle of the feasibility study. I wonder where that's all at in terms of getting people involved and being aware of what we're doing.
Well, as I stated at the very beginning of the meeting, all of the feasibility, all of the Firehall Steering Committee meetings were open to the public. We've had 2 council members at that public. We've had staff at that meeting. These meetings are open to the public. People were most welcome to speak at the microphone. We've had many letters here from constituents, as well as Pearson College and Beecher Bay. And the majority of these are in favor of moving forward with rebuilding the fire hall and taking advantage of the grant opportunities. So where we are is we'll continue with having meetings and public engagement. We haven't decided as a council what kind of a formal open house or formal public engagement besides the council meetings we've had. Councillor,
I just finished to say, I guess partly for me, my understanding is that there was certainly public meetings with people could be involved, but I read the note at the beginning and it looks like much of the work was done through a subcommittee where the public wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn what's going on. So I don't think it's been, and there haven't been that many meetings of the steering committee itself. So I think we should be careful how we describe it. And I'm just saying that I think this is, well, for 40 years, Metchosin has been without debt. And the idea that we would sort of move along here and move into a position where we might put the district into debt does require careful consideration. And I think the public voice is important with specific opportunities other than just that we have meetings and people can attend.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Shukin.
So to Councillor Gray's point, I think there are plenty of opportunities left for public engagement, because if we decide to move on this, all we've done essentially is select an option likely we're going to pursue or bring to a grant process. We haven't decided to build it. We still have to wait for the outcome of the grant process and see where we get. So we've selected an option to begin to focus in on that. So again, there's a lot of room between the options being presented here and to a decision to build. So, and there is time for public engagement there. So.
Yeah, thank you. I was reminded by staff today that in small communities, you have committees that actually take the place of what staff would do. And when staff are making those decisions, it's not done in the public. And so I guess if you're going to criticize the steering committee for having a subcommittee to go through some of the nitty-gritty, it would be the same as asking for complete transparency of what this staff is doing on a day-to-day basis on different projects. Councillor Gray.
I just wanted to say that the subcommittee reported at the steering committee meetings.
Thank you. Councillor, Brent, and then Steve.
Sorry, I think you put me second on the list there.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my point was just to clarify when you had laid out all of the participation that was possible. Much of it was not criticizing the steering committee. I think I'm impressed by what they've done and appreciate the work.
Just a point of clarification on the new layout site options. The overall steering committee was not involved with any of the decision-making on these drawings before you. We weren't consulted. We received these later in a package from the district.
Okay. Any other questions about this? Either the architects, or before we move on to the ALR component, about the building site, about the benefits of building on the adjacent site? Yeah, go ahead.
I just have to respond to that comment. These documents, as a steering committee, we voted that they would be produced, and then they came forward. So that was a motion that was put forward that we would engage these consultants, and that's where the information came from at a later time.
Not to get in an argument, but on our last steering committee meeting minutes, or the agenda, the documents were presented, but they were unreadable, so there was no discussion on the new options and site. And you weren't there, unfortunately, and as well as Mr. Carline and Mr. Sear.
Thank you. Okay, so any other comments for the items that we've already discussed? If not, let's move along to item number 4.1.4, which is the planner's memorandum, ALR application options when planning for future of municipal buildings within the agricultural land reserve 4450 Happy Valley Road. And I'll ask the CAO to walk us through this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you through the chair. I can go through this a little quicker. Maybe people are getting tired. I think the committee had a chance to read the report, so I will summarize it, but I just wanted to preface it with a few comments. The ALR is the reserve, and the ALR is the catalog of property that makes up the reserve in BC, and the ALC is the commission. The commission chair is Jennifer Dyson, and she's hails out of the Alberni Valley. She chairs the commission. There's 19 commissioners, commission members appointed from 6 administrative regions of the province, who are collectively the board of directors. And the chair of the commission is appointed by order of council, of cabinet, and all other members of the commission are appointed by ministerial order. Other salient points are that the commission on average adjudicate more than 400 applications each year. The chair of the commission has authority to establish panels of 2 or more members, which she has done, and she has directed 6 decision-making panels, 1 for each of the 6 administrative regions of the province. The commission deliberates on the applications. The staff of the commission carry out regulatory and processes. And the chair of the commission directs the flow of information on the adjudication and the workload of the commission. So, all that being said, my understanding from our history of applications are that we receive responses around 3 months period, but we've never done an exclusion. So I would anticipate that to be a longer process, probably up to 6 months. We of course have the opportunity as staff to contact the ALC commission staff and move forward as quickly as we can on applications. We've already contacted myself, the planner, the ALC staff, they're aware of the dialogue, and so we've already basically initiated a process. But we would have to do it a formal application process, so I'll just go through the report quickly for everybody. So the formal application process would be submitted by our planner. It would be a resolution of council. We would apply either for non-farm use, or we would apply for an exclusion to remove 4450 Happy Valley Road. Traditionally, we've gone with the non-farm use for decades. And that's been successful. The ALC considers several interrelated factors. It reviews the variables that it considers relevant to the application and weighs the likelihood and likely impact of the proposal against a long-term goal of preserving agricultural land. So those are basically our two options. 4450 Happy Valley Road is not in the Village Center Development Permitted area. And breakdown of the exclusion application, there's two questions, two fairly important questions to talk about. I think tonight would be, in your package would be, would an application to remove only a portion would it provide for more efficiency of use of land, or would it be more complicated use of land? And would an application to remove only a portion allow for the preservation of agricultural land on the remaining lands? Meaning, if we took a little portion of 445 and put a building on it and didn't take the rest of that out of the ALR land, would it be used for agriculture? That's something to discuss. I don't have a comment on that.
Okay, thank you. So each option, either applying for a non-farm use or for exclusion to remove 4450 Happy Valley Road or part thereof, would require a formal application. Yeah, okay. Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions regarding the ALC or the ALR land adjacent to the Firehall? Go ahead, Brent.
Certainly as a farmer, I know there was a speaker earlier that said this land wouldn't be conducive to agriculture. I understand the convenience of building something next door here, but certainly I wouldn't be in favor of having all the municipal lands removed from the ALC. It may seem like we're not doing anything in the way of agriculture now, but 100 years from now, you can put greenhouses and you can run sheep, and we don't know what the global economy or food production will be. So certainly I'm in favor of just annexing or removing the area that the possible new fire station could be built.
Anybody else have any comments? Councillor Shukin.
So the questions I would have, and maybe we can't answer them today, maybe we can though, is if we move to the non-farm use, I think we would define like a space, like we have, I don't know whether it's surveyed, and I'm sure we would use part of that as a lay down area as well. And so I guess is it a case of surveying a portion of land and then you apply for that, or some other way of defining the property?
So what would the CAO, what would be the process? Would it just be from the existing maps that would be included in the application, and a drawing over that map, or an overlay saying this is what we would like to have annexed out of the ALR for the non-farm use?
I don't 100% know myself, but this current building is non-farm use, so this building is parceled out of the ALR for non-farm use. The rest of this land is ALR, so when this building was done, it was parceled out somehow in a drawing or in a legal document or whatnot. So that's how it's done.
I think the community house is the same situation, and that's fairly recent, I think in the last 20-ish years. So it'd be the same sort of application, might be, able to find that information out.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, where we're sitting tonight was the original house of the property, which is now down, it's the EOC. It's a Panaboat. The Chosen Community Association, the house, was another house where we see the Pioneer Museum. That was a barn. So it was originally a farm site, which is probably why it's ALR as well. Second to that, the earlier comment about the land not being useful for farming, I would strongly disagree. As the mayor and I, at the beginning of our term, took a tour of Sandown Raceway, which is now a regenerative agricultural site. And they're doing amazing things of bringing the soil back. A lot of work, I know, but this is very good soil here. Yes, it gets compacted a little bit for market days, maybe the fair once a year, that sort of thing. So it's easily remediated. It easily could be farmed, and it is not contaminated. And certainly the school site is not contaminated. It hasn't had chemicals on in probably 10 years. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, but these are still good pieces of land that could be used in the future. We don't know. So we just have to decide what it is that our community needs for this structure. Yeah, and there's a lot more information that I think we're going to see in the next few weeks or next month or so.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Rep.
Well, considering that we do have the property across the road at the school, which is in the ALR, and we don't have any particular plans for that besides the community garden, which is a good use of it. But at any rate, I believe that this section should be taken out of the ALR just because it is our municipal grounds and we have several municipal buildings on it already. And it's just to do anything on it the way it is, it's extremely complicated. I know the cricket club went through that, just trying to do that little piece of improvement on the cricket pitch, and it was just to jump through all the hoops just to get something small like that done. And I can't see that this area on this side will ever be used for any kind of a farming as long as it remains a municipal area where this building is and the others. And so I think that going for the exclusion would be the best option.
Certainly operationally, it would be much easier to build on the land next to the fire hall. Other municipalities have to either buy land or expropriate land or build up. We're in a very, very fortunate situation where we have this land available. I'm wondering if there's somebody at the table or perhaps the fire chief can talk about that operational piece. Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, sorry, Matter. We're closing in on 10.
Yeah.
Which, do we need a motion to continue past
Yeah, if
10?
I could get a motion to continue past 10. Moved by Councillor Shukin, second by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Not
Thanks.
much past 10?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of operationally, what would that look like? I'm not a firefighter. If somebody could give me some help out here. DC Henny, thank you.
Yeah, so when we talk about operationally, there's a lot of benefits to building on a new site and maintaining our service that we're providing to the community right now. I've been through a department that has gone through this exact problem. We did have to relocate. We relocated to a small barn, and it was a large challenge for us to achieve equal service that we were giving. So the one thing that we have to consider as well is we're not going to do this, or we want to move a temporary structure like it was talked about earlier, that our temporary hall is going to move over there, and we are going to continue operating out of our hall. We have to also consider that we're going to be doing ground preps. We're going to be putting in power grids. There's going to be a fortune spent just before we can even put tent structures in place. We can look around. Other departments are going through it right now. Esquimalt is in temporary tents. They got a bunch of different tents to house each apparatus separately. There's security of apparatus and issues around where we put our internal gear, where it's washed, containments. So as you can see in some of their drawings, there's a lot of buildings and components to add just to have a temporary housing on another site so we can operate still. I don't really see an easy way for us to get around staying or removing ourselves from the current building, tearing it down, and trying to operate out of a temporary site. We don't have a lot of options in the community to even rehouse the equipment alone. Something to consider is each truck is an average weight of 40,000 pounds. So there's going to be a lot of soil remediation just to make sure that we can hold that equipment. So right away, we're going to be doing a lot of damage to that soil to continue in the ALC as well, just even putting a temporary there.
Okay, thank you for that. Fire Chief, did you have anything you wanted to add? No? Okay. Anybody else at the table? No. Okay, so what questions do we have remain unanswered that we need information to move this forward to the next step? What is it that you're thinking? Questions remaining. This is the time when we have the expertise at the table, and I think we still have Ed online. What questions do we have, Councillor Donaldson?
Well, I think
I'm here.
One of the questions is there more than one option that we're going to be looking at? And I guess we'll discuss that on Monday night.
On Monday night, yep. We'll hopefully be able to come to some conclusion on the option on Monday.
If we apply for the grant with one option, can we alter that option should we get the grant?
CEO Payette.
So I can only go by experience. My most recent grant application was successful for a sewer treatment plant upgrade for $7 million. We received it a year and a half ago, maybe at this point. They're still working through the final design process and regulatory process, and the project kind of ebbs and flows through that final design. And so the grant authority understands the engineering processes. So we're submitting our best Class D and drawings at a certain point for the funding, and we put our very best case forward as to what we think the final result would be for a project, but tweaking it afterwards is, I think, well known. But relocating and doing a totally different option would be problematic and would probably require, I don't know, a review of the grant application, I would think. So I would be cautious on that one.
Okay. Fire Chief?
Thank you. Just through experience with the grant for the school, that infrastructure grant, we did some changes to that, and we decided to put in the kitchen and the washrooms, and we just applied and just advised them of why, and explained what we were doing, and they were fine with that. So they've already allocated the funds to whoever wins that grant. The other thing I'd like to just remind everybody, this is just a feasibility study. We aren't breaking ground next week or anything. It is just the idea and the general principles of do we want to take down the apparatus bay and build new, or do we want to take out, move it on the fresh ground next door? What does that look like? Those kinds of decisions. What it actually looks like, ends up looking like, that's a long way out yet. So I guess I just want to make sure that we all remember that this is just a feasibility.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? DC Henny.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about, there are some conversations around hall designs, like 2-story, 1-story, and reasons behind it. When we look around the province itself on the 2 stories, 1 stories, that was lent to the size of the property. That was their designs. But look at Cumberland, was done in 2018, I believe. They purchased another piece of land and they put a single story up because they had the space to do it. Nanaimo was constrained to its city lot. They didn't have choices, and they built it behind their hall while maintaining operation in their front hall. Cowichan Bay Fire Department, same issue. They were designed based on the size of the property. It's on the angle because that was the piece that they had in the field behind them. They could remain operational. So it's a lot of thought put into whether we stay on the sites or not on the sites, or whether we go up or out. It's not like the committee hasn't thought of those things. And when we talked about cost overruns and everything, a great example for everybody to look at would be the Salt Spring Fire Department. They're going through their build right now. They have a fantastic site. They give quarterly updates on where they're at on budget, projections. They're on track for their $13 million. Cowichan Bay, don't quote me on the numbers, I believe came in around $15 million quote. The chief chopped out a lot of frivolous things and brought it down to a more reasonable, down around 12 million. And I think they're pretty on track with their budget. So some things to look around that other departments have done and other communities have done. And when we look at like Salt Spring, they went through a lot of different RFPs. If you look at the history of Salt Spring trying to achieve theirs, is the first one that came forward on a feasibility study wasn't the option the community chose. It was denied at the community level because that was what they presented. So they came back with other options, other options, other options. And I think if we go to the community with 10 different options or 2 different options, it's just going to start confusing the process.
So regarding the Cowichan Valley, there was a 2 or a 3 bay that's facing the main highway, and they built on the backside a 4 bay.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. And are they going to continue using the 2 or 3 bay that is existing, or that's going to be repurposed or torn down?
That is being removed. That was in their plans that they're removing that building. The other department that went through a upgrade, or if we want to call it seismic, was if we look at North Cowichan and Crofton department went through it. And they spent, I think their budget was around 4.8, and they were pretty close with it. And all they did was the administration and training side, and it turned into a 3-story. They have a basement and 2 stories at level and above. Again, property only lent to building it that way. The truck bays weren't that old, but they brought them up to current code as well. So they did exterior work on them and stuff like that to tie it into the new building and bring it up to code.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
Thanks for that, Scott. That makes sense. What kind of things, we heard also from the architect that mid-project you start cutting things out, to bring it under budget. What kind of things get cut out? It seems like it's all needed.
Yeah, so I guess from what I understand of the documents in Cowichan Bay, when they started doing things, was it could be as simple as the finishes, like polished floors or certain floors, and they can reduce those kind of things to reduce that square footage cost. It may not be that they're removing services or they're going to repurpose rooms, which the subcommittee, we did talk with JDA Associates there when we were doing the space program on, well, we need to make these rooms more multi-purpose. They need to have dual purposes. So we spent a lot of time going through that space program, reducing space size because it wasn't needed, or putting rooms that we could do multiple things with. Even when we look at Souk, when they did their hall renovation, they chose a hall renovation on their hall instead of replacement. It came down to the quarters and stuff like that. So they put Murphy beds in their offices for their officers. That's their sleeping quarters. So that was the space that they had to deal with. So those are the kind of things that, when I say that they start cutting costs out, is looking at efficiencies like that. And I think the subcommittee did a great job at revising that space program.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Shukin.
Sorry, I just want to harken back to the way what Chief Dunlop had just said in terms of we are there will be an ongoing feasibility assessment. I think DC Henning is essentially saying that too. So I think what essentially we are on the cusp of deciding is that we are going to take steps to address a lingering problem in this community, and that is a derelict fire hall. Where we go with that and what we build and how much it's going to cost is still to be decided. And I think as a council, we have to keep that in mind and open the door for public input as those opportunities arise. One of the big ones is going to be, again, how much we get for the grant and then what that means in terms of what we can afford. So that's a door we have to keep open, but keep open once we have knowledge of it. So yeah, knowledge of, again, of what we get. So,
Councillor Bryan.
So just to understand, through the chair, Councillor Shukin, you mean that we start going down the path with this study and then say we get $1 million from the grant? Then what happens?
That's
I mean, maybe that's a hypothetical you can't
Yeah.
answer, but I didn't mean it in that way. But what are you thinking exactly?
well, that's pretty simple because we would have to, again, reflect on the cost of the building before us and what that means in terms of financing. So whether that means a loan or whatever. So I don't think, again, we're making, again, final notice to proceed. That's not what we're doing tonight or next week. Not in September either. So there's a long way to go. And I think Chief Dunlop said that, but we're in some ways putting a spike in the ground and saying we're going to try and deal with this problem that we've got. So.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments at the table? Everybody's getting tired. Yeah, please.
One comment I wanted to, or one thing I wanted to address on page 6, which is the square footage of the building size, is listed at 4,000 square feet. And I went back through our ancient archives into a space study that we did in the very beginning of our committee. And we came up with around 8628 square feet. So somewhere that would have been interior dimensions, I guess. So we're probably closer to 9,000 square feet with the existing building. And that's been noted and will be corrected on the reports that come.
Okay, so that's an important point. So we're going from 9,000 to 16, not 4 to 16. Correct. Okay.
So we would change that, on 2.0 existing building and site description, and then the building size says 4,000, and it should say
8,628.
Thank you.
Ish. Okay. Staff, have we missed any questions? Any comments? No, this is going to be further discussed at other meetings. So with that, I want to thank you for your input. Thank you for your expertise and your patience. And I think we did accomplish a lot of things tonight. We were able to come together and ask some difficult questions, and answers were provided. I want to also thank our consultant, Ed. Thank you very much for joining in again. And we look forward to working with you further. Okay.
I do as well. Thank you.
With that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Good evening.